As business owners, we often seek no guidance, no help other than perhaps a YouTube video or some anecdotal insights. We rarely counsel a professional who can guide us through the issues and the challenges we have. Why don't we do that? Maybe it's financial. Maybe we don't know where to go as far as resources are concerned. Maybe, just maybe, we don't think anyone knows as much about our business as we do. Well, I've invited Joe Thompson back on the show who can talk about this role of consultancy. Can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is a call to leadership. Joe Thompson, glad to have you back on the show.
Nice to be here.
You're a consultant.
I am.
I'm a consultant.
You are.
Let's talk about consulting.
Yes.
I think our listener is in the place to where they have had a business or they have been in leadership position and they haven't had all the answers. So
Common.
What normally happens is one of several things. I try to muddle through. I end up in a worse position. I give up. I bring someone on that I think is going to help, but I'm not quite sure because they've never helped me before. I just spend a lot of time worrying about the situation. I do nothing at all.
And that's where the biggest pain comes in, is the constant worrying that, that's unhealthy in any aspect of your life. But when you're worrying about your business, like your livelihood, that's really impactful. Stress-wise.
Yeah. And people, we see it all the time. You and I have seen this in our practices, in our mutual practice, in our past, in our current. And it's painful for us because we see when the entrepreneur truly needs help, the business owner needs help, or the leadership team needs help. And for one reason or another, they're not getting the help they need.
Yeah. And that could be, I think a lot of it as an entrepreneur, I think, when you start building a business, you just feel like you have, a grip on it. And, as you grow or expand or whatever it is, you're very close to that business. Like you're looking at it from 3 inches away at times because you have to analyze everything that's going on in there. And a lot of times they're just too close to it to know what they need. And if they could get a set of eyes on their business that's maybe, 5,000 feet. But I think there's some pride there too for entrepreneurs to say, hey, I need help.
Yeah. I think that comes into play because it's my baby. Who's going to help me raise my kid? And secondly, is it worth it? I mean, you hear the word consultant and you think, oh, I should run. Shyster, take my money. Nothing's going to happen. Yeah. And maybe that's the case in sometimes.
And that's a big factor of why I wanted to be a consultant, is because I don't trust a lot of consultants. And I've seen a lot of businesses hurt by them.
Yeah. So the business that needs you most is likely to resist you most for a number of factors. And we've seen this, and breaking this down in this series of episodes is important because we want to be able to lay out when it's important, when it's time to have a professional consultant come into your business, and some of the characteristics and the qualities of those consultants, what you need to have, non-negotiables. And so let's break down first the problems. Some of the problems that people face, and here's the other thing, and I know we're going to get to this. There's problems that you have that you don't know you have.
Oh yeah.
There's so many blind spots.
Yes.
You're not going to hear about it internally.
Usually not.
Yeah, sometimes you will, but generally speaking, you won't.
Because they may not see it themselves.
They may not see it. They may be a part of it, the problem.
Maybe afraid to say it.
Maybe afraid to say it. You may not have created an environment that is open, transparent. And so you may be working without all the resources and the data you need to make wise choices, good decisions in your business. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if you were to go and look through the businesses that you've helped, what are some of the symbols or the common characteristics in the leadership in terms of what they're experiencing problem-wise that they either do see or they don't see?
Wow, that's a
big one.
That's a deep question. When we say leadership, you and I think the audience understands what we mean by leadership. Unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners or even CEOs of companies, they're more in management than they are leadership. So they're not building an environment, right, where it is thriving from everyone else in the company too. So they'll be like a person who just keeps putting out fires. So if you're a manager and you're always putting out fires, that's a good sign that you might need a consultant. If your bottom line is being affected, that's the first thing everyone sees. Hey, we're not making enough money. And right away, it's got to be sales. But oftentimes, as we talked about in the past, you might be just losing a lot of money right out the back of your business and not even realize it.
Yeah.
So, the leader who is open to advice, which is hard to find at times. I joke about sometimes having to make the business money in spite of the leaders there. If you find yourself in any kind of situation where there is some panic setting in, if you need a panic button, that's the time to find a consultant. The problem is you need one that can come in and analyze your whole business, right? That has the resources and the skills to analyze your whole business and then tell you what you need. That's where I would want to start if I was a business owner. Because if I run out and I just get like some marketing people, or I run out and I get, a leadership guy or an organizational guy, whatever it is, if I don't need those things, then they're not going to help. And then now I'm in it deep with more money. And that's why people, I think, want to run.
Yeah.
When you say consultant.
Yeah. I mean, I know being in business for almost 30 years, I've shied away from consultants because I've thought the same thing. Like, okay, are they really going to help me? How do I trust them? Where do I start? And it's interesting because the way we operate is the depth of not only analysis, but control that you require is an indication that, look, I am responsible for the steps that are taken in this process of change, because ultimately that's what it is, right? So I found that, especially the way you work consultancy, is you have like the ultimate say in your contract.
Yes. Yeah.
That's got to be like, excuse me, is that what your contract says?
Hey, so you go into a business that's been run in a particular way for 10 years and it's failing, right? Do I still need your opinion at that point of what's going wrong? You've been trying this for 10 years and it's not working. So what I'm going to do, and that's why I write my contract in that way, to have the ultimate say over stuff, is I'm going to relieve you from that worry or that doubt or that hyper decision making that managers make all the time. I want to take that away from you. I want you to relax and then let me start to kind of peel apart the onion and look at the organization and what it's like and then rebuild it. And in rebuilding it, that's when I don't want anyone getting in the way. Yeah. That's the hardest thing, because that's where all the change is going to come. And people are going to quit, and people are going to complain, and everything that you would expect from folks that don't want to change. And you might want to take a look around and see, hey, I'm surrounded by all these folks that don't want to change, and my business is kind of hurting.
It's stagnating.
So maybe the utilization of your people there is not at its highest level. Yeah. And I'll take care of that for you too.
Well, you bring up a good point, because I think that you ever watch the show The Prophet? I don't know if you've seen it with Marcus Lemonis. It's a pretty good show. He goes in and changes businesses. He doesn't act quite as a consultant as much, in part a consultant, but also as an owner. And he makes a decision whether or not he's going to invest in this business.
Yeah, I know the guy. I've never seen the show.
And it's in same parameters. It's I have to control this process because control creates order, and order leads to perfection or harmony or excellence or whatever you want to fill in the blank. It leads to that end goal that you desire. And when your business cannot achieve that end goal, that means the kind of control you have doesn't lead to the kind of order that's necessary.
Right.
So there has to be changes in the control mechanisms to create a different kind of order.
Yeah. And that's the scary part of bringing in a consultant. But if you're not scared, I don't think they're doing their job. Because, decisions that have to be made that lead to change, there is always going to be pushback from that because, people get into a pattern, almost a rut of working at their job, and they don't want it to change. They just want, I just want to come in. I want to do my time. I want to get my paycheck. I want to go home. And when I approach, the CEO of a company and I'm like, hey, look, you have 5 people here on the floor that are just coming in for a paycheck. They don't want to help move the business forward, improve in any way on their customer service skills or master their job anymore. I need to get rid of them. And, a lot of times I hear, oh, well, he or she's been with the company for 10 years.
Right.
Yeah, that unfortunately, if they haven't been improving over the last 10 years, you're losing money on that employee. So probably the hardest part of change is when, I have to make someone leave. Now, that doesn't happen as much as you think. Most of the time, we'll raise the bar on the way the company works. And you'll find them right away, they'll jump ship because it's just not in them.
Right. They're
not going to help you raise the bar. They don't want to be tested in this way. So they flee the company. And, when HR panics, oh my God, we've had all this turnover. I'm like, yes, that's a good thing. We've let that take itself out of the equation. And now we can get into getting those A players in like we always talk about.
It reminds me of this formula for how we get to a brand. We don't start with the brand. The brand is the end result.
Mm-hmm.
The brand is a reflection of our reputation, of how we operate in the marketplace. Our reputation is a reflection of our values. Our values are a reflection of how we lay a foundation for our culture and our community and our business. And in some ways, what you're saying is that part of our value system does not lead us to the kind of reputation that leads us to the kind of brand that's successful.
Absolutely.
Ultimately. And so when we are refining our values are gatekeepers. They will help people to understand what is permitted and what is prohibited in this environment. And once we refine those values, once we amend those values, once we change those values because they're necessary, because we have to make changes to how our reputation is perceived and ultimately our brand that leads to us to our desired end result or meeting our mission, our vision, then we send the message that, hey, if you believe in these values, then you will have a place here because these values are essential to creating this reputation. And you've said this before on the show, it's not about buying in. I love how you phrase it. It's about belief, because you can buy into something and that's okay until something better that you want to put your effort into and buy into that comes along.
Yeah.
But belief is different. It's been said that to believe something is to be living it. It's literally an acting out of your core. And what we want to do is we want to align those values. Mm-hmm. We want to align individual values with company values so that we're all rowing in the same direction. Now, somebody might push back and say, well, doesn't that alienate people? Doesn't that alienate people who perhaps will feel like there's not enough diversity in our values? And the answer to that is yes and no. It will alienate people, but not necessarily from a diversity perspective. Diversity in your values is fantastic, but a diversity in everyone having different values in the organization is catastrophic.
Right. Absolutely. It's whenever I go into a company and they tell me they're having trouble, okay, the first thing I ask them, what are your core values? First thing. And you'll find some businesses where, everybody looks around and they have no core values and they think they have culture. And, I'm of the make that I don't think you can truly establish a good culture if it's not established around some kind of core belief that is what is moving the company towards whatever its goal is. Like, no one gets in the business to fail, right? No one says, hey, let's open this up. Let's do it kind of mediocre for a little while, and then let's tank the place.
I mean, unless you're Richard Pryor and Brewster's Millions. That's a one-off.
Well, you have that example. But for most of us.
Yeah, people who aren't trying to lose whatever it was, $10 million so they can inherit $100 million.
Yeah, for most of us, we're in business to, one, not only make money, but to stay in business, right?
Yeah.
And how do you stay in business? You make money. So, it becomes that circle. And the belief in it is just so important because, if we're down on the floor and we're working a machine all day, we're sometimes under the mentality that, like, I'm working for the owners. I'm working for the board. I'm working for whoever is in control of this whole thing. And what we failed to establish because we don't develop core values and we don't help our employees to believe in those core values, moves the vision of the employee from I work for these people to I now work for this company and this company provides for me, right? So employment is a give and take, right? And when you see it any other way than that, when you think I'm owed or they deserve, you're really in the wrong headspace to be an employee anywhere. You're working to make money for a company so that company can pay for your livelihood, right?
Yeah.
If you're not in the place you want to be with your livelihood, it's not the company's fault necessarily. Maybe they need to get more out of you. Maybe you need to improve yourself a little bit. Like, they've already taken the risk. Like, they've got the money out on the line. These are a bunch of broke people when this company goes under, right?
Yeah.
They're all in debt. They're chapter 7s at this point. You just go on to another job, right? So that wouldn't happen if you thought of the company as this, hey, this is an entity I believe in. It helps all of these people here have their livelihood, feed their babies, drive their cars. If we start to change the culture of the way the employee even views the employer, we'll be miles ahead of any other country in the world.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, it reminds me of, I taught several courses at one of the universities and on business. And you watch students go through the process. These are all adult accelerated learners, so they're working all day. And they go through the process of earning a bachelor's in business administration or a master's. And initially, they're critiquing their companies because they see things in the textbook that said, oh, they could do this, they could do that, they could do that. And then they get to the course where they actually start a business. So it's the very last course in this program, and it's business planning.
Now my skin's in it.
And toward the end, there's a lot of humility that comes into play to the point where toward the very end of the class, there's a dramatic shift in the students. Again, these are all employees of corporations generally. And they go from sort of snide scathing to, wow, man, I'm lucky to have a paycheck. This is hard. I don't know that I could ever muster this. This is one of the most difficult things that I'd ever thought about doing, and I won't do it now that I've taken your class. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because that is, now on the other hand, somebody might say, well, my company already gets lots out of me, and they work me to the bone. I don't have any real reward from this company other than a paycheck. And I guess the other question is, well, what's the agreement? What does the contract say? Does your contract say that you have any other remuneration than your financial one? The answer is no, then that's what you signed up for. Now, some companies do offer more. Some companies do offer intangible benefits. Some companies offer a sense of purpose, sense of mastery, a sense of autonomy, and things like that. Now, and if the company is creating a value system around that, and they make agreements with you, you also have to be the kind of person that contributes to that. And I think that's part of what you're sharing, is that sometimes within the organization, there is an unfortunate expectation for, especially, I mean, we could talk about this on a national scale, but entitlement. And entitlement can be very dangerous in any organization. And this is what I tell clients, and I even tell my own team. There is no one person who is more important or above the mission, the vision, or the values, including myself. That is the importance of that relationship with us and the company. And if we can't get that part right, and if we don't even understand what they are to begin with, well, then where are we going? I mean, no wonder why our bottom line is in the red. No wonder why our morale is low. No wonder why we have perhaps high turnover and low productivity.
As far as I know, and maybe this has happened, but as far as I'm aware of, there has never been a corporation that breaks into someone's house at night, kidnaps them, and forces them to work in their factory or their
maybe
office.
Here in the United States.
and that's where my experience lies, here in the United States. So that's what I'm going to deal with. I have never seen anyone chained to a machine or to a fryer in any business that I've ever been in. Okay, maybe it happens, but I don't see it. And you're always welcome to not work for the company. You know, in fact, like, you're doing them a favor if you take all the, the hate that's built up, and it's building up in your head. Like, you're creating this big monster, right? Because no one's twisting their mustache, at the top levels and going, hey, we really want to abuse our employees, get the most out of them. In the past, yeah, a lot of that has happened. But today, with our, work laws and things like that, there's still places that are tough to work. You're a coal miner, it's going to be a hard day.
Yeah.
But usually coal mining companies don't bring in consultants. They have a very direct path to their money. But for firms and corporations that start to spread, beyond even their own umbrella, there's a lot of moving parts there, right? And they need help not only seeing the way each part is moving in it, but they usually need help, getting it all integrated, which integration is a tough thing to do. It takes a lot of experience, a lot of training, a lot of skill to even know, hey, how am I going to approach this, right? So from the employee perspective, you're probably better off not working for a place that you've grown to hate. Because once someone loses trust in a company, the company will never be forgiven for it. Okay. So there's a lot of statistics out there, that I seem to be the only one interested in, but there's a lot of statistics saying, hey, why do people leave companies? And I wanted to know, why do people not leave companies? What keeps them there? And above all things, even above pay, believe it or not, even above pay and all the amenities that may come with that particular job, they stay because of culture. And culture is defined by your core values.
Yeah.
So if you're hating your company, they either don't have core values, or you don't know their core values, or they can be failing you in some way. But if they do have those things in place and you haven't taken the time to look at them and say, hey, what if I was to incorporate this into just the time that I'm here, just that much? I think you would wake up to a different company every morning.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And those values, if you don't have them, that's part of a consultant's role to help you establish them.
Develop them all the time.
Yeah. Extract them. We actually went through this process at our income tax and accounting firm. I had our core values established for many years, and it was time for a refresh. And so I invited the team to a retreat, a one-day retreat, and we went through a core values exercise to where everyone participated. We looked at what we would duplicate in our, in the people who we admired and respected most, who we thought would do wonderful things in the company. Then we looked at different combinations of how those traits and characteristics played out in our environment. And we came up with 4 core values. And the first one began with care extraordinarily. And we talked about, why is it important to care extraordinarily? And the buy-in, the level of commitment, and the level of belief was extraordinary. And what the end result is when I sent out the finalized core values, I asked the team, if anyone doesn't believe in these, and it's okay, just come see me, because it may or not be time for you to stay any longer. It's that serious. It's that important.
It is that serious.
But the good news is that no one said, I don't believe in these. I do, because most of the people who were there helped me to author them. And that's the thing about when you have, now this is something that in the consulting world, we would caution you to evaluate your team members before you invited them to join you in this type of training, because you generally have 3 kinds of people, if not more, in your organization. You have your combative, you have your compliant, and you have your committed. And it's the combative who are the cancerous and possibly who will sabotage your organization. And there's like you said, there's very little, and I mean very little hope for that particular person to turn around in this environment. It's one of those things like someone perhaps you've been dating, and there's been a really, really bad situation to where they're never going to forgive you for it. It probably just needs to end that relationship in that way.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, that's okay from the employee's point of view. It's okay from the entity's point of view, that this relationship isn't working. We need to move on to a relationship that was, because like you said earlier, no one person is more important than the business itself. And, I always ask that when we're sitting around the boardroom, hey, who's the most important person in the room? Or are you going to point to the CEO, who are you going to point to? And the most important thing in the room is the entity itself. And we forget that is a part of what we are as people that are in business. Now, this is going to sound foreign to people who aren't business minded and they're not entrepreneurial. It might seem a little strange for us to consider this entity like a person that we serve, right, in order for it to serve us back. So if we want the best kind of service out of our business, then we serve it the best way that we can. And you can't do that with, ego or megalomania or, narcissism. Those aren't the kind of traits that, build big, healthy companies. Now, can you build a big company? Sure. But when you look at those kind of companies that have been built through that kind of structure, it's very debilitating to the employees, and there's always a revolving door of in and out, in and out, in and out.
I think that's important because that distinction helps to frame how we view the entity. In fact, when we establish companies all the time for clients, and it's entity formation. That's what we call it, entity formation. It is forming an entity which then has its own life. And what's interesting about that entity is that as you feed it, it grows. And you had mentioned narcissism and the negativity. When you feed it that's what it grows into. When you feed it, just like a child, when you feed a child positivity and morals and ethics and healthy behavior, that child grows up in that environment. And the environment plays a huge role in how this entity forms. What you feed it, what you give it, how you serve it, it then turns around and serves it back to you.
Yes. And I have a lot of respect for companies and people who start companies, and I don't want anyone to get a feeling that there's some naivety here about, well, what about the big evil companies? That's what we're talking about. The company that has a good moral compass and is community centered and is employee centered is not, dumping 30 tons of waste into the drinking water. So, that's a company that's being fed by an immoral compass to do nothing but make money, do nothing but meet the bottom line. And, look at the harm that is done by companies that are built that way and perform that way. Those are companies that I personally wouldn't even want to be a part of, because once you have to get rid of everyone that is making any kind of decision in a company, you're basically just closing the company down and rebuilding it. So there are evil companies out there. Like, we know that we've seen that. And if you're working for one of those companies, maybe you reevaluate whether or not this kind of company you want to be with. And unfortunately, you go to a small town and, there's a lead smelting plant. It's the only thing supporting that community. Is it poisoning people? Yeah. I mean, there's such duality to, loving a company and the necessary evil of a company. And here's what I found. That's why I do think of them as a person. What kind of person did we raise here?
This is a good segue. As a consultant, choosing who is worthy of your consultancy, because some companies which have owners or leaders, managers who are resistant to positive change, perhaps they're the cancer, perhaps they're the toxic leadership, perhaps they're the narcissist. And we've seen them. And if you're listening and you were around in the 2000s, you'll remember this slew of companies: Enron, Tyco, WorldCom. And there's a thread that runs through these companies who were swindling and toxic. They were the CEOs. They were the chief. The whole C-suite staff members were unethical, corrupt, and driven to have their own needs met above and beyond all of the stakeholders. And at that point, Joe, sometimes it's just better to tell a particular potential client that I can't help you because I
don't want to.
Yeah, I know.
Let it die.
And it's got to be a situation to where the entire organization has a restructure, at least within the C-suite. This is like the situation where how you end up with a strong lawn. And he talked about planting good seed and just spreading more and more good seed, and you can choke out weeds. There are times, however, when the weeds are so dense that you've just got to scorch and remove all of the weeds and start over.
Yeah.
That's a reality sometimes. That's not what we're talking about today, but we get it. And if you're working in a climate like that, you have to be concerned with your own mental, spiritual, emotional stability and your health.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, and where consultants can help is when the leadership group, whether they're the C-suite, whether they're a small business owner, a medium-sized business owner, is accepting and ready for the kind of change that's necessary, even if it hurts.